Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Munira for tonight's event celebrating influential Muslim women in the Bay Area. There is much cause for celebrating the ongoing Women's History Month and this past Monday's International Women's Day. We now have a woman of color in the White House, and Black women in Georgia, including Stacey Abrams, flipped the Senate blue. In this moment, what Muslim women role models can we celebrate? One gem from the Islamic tradition that I can think of is the Iraqi Rabi'a al-Adawiyya of the 8th century. As a young orphan, she was sold into slavery. She would spend her days in fasting and her nights in prayer. Rabi'a al-Adawiyya is quoted to have said, "First the neighbor, then the house," meaning that people should worship God out of love rather than the fear of hell or promise of paradise. She symbolizes the importance of spiritual excellence over gender and of female autonomy and freedom from male authority. Here in the Bay Area, Bay Muslim media decided to celebrate our very own women engaged in service. Our goal is to simply highlight some of our local gems from a variety of walks of life. We are blessed with many, and owing to time limitations, we can have only a few on tonight. I'm now going to introduce my guests. Ustaza Rania Awad, Amelah El-Amin, Maha Elgenaidi, Maheen Ahmed, Aisha Wahab, Samina Usman, Reshma Heather, Alia Sharif, and last but not the least, Samina Sundas. Thank you, my dear, amazing guests, for joining me tonight. I'm going to be speaking with you one-on-one in a little bit, but first, I do have a disclaimer aimed at all of you. Your resumes are rich because you have dedicated a lifetime to service. I will try my best to capture some of your life's work, hopefully enough to awe-inspire some in the audience tonight and to shatter stereotypes for some others. Before I start speaking with my guests individually, I must acknowledge our sponsors for tonight. Thank you, South Bay Islamic Association, the Muslim Community Association, Council on American Islamic Relations California, Islamophobia Study Center, ICNA Council for Social Justice, and Northern California Islamic Council for supporting this program. And now I turn to my first guest. In Ramadan 2018, my kids were little and I was struggling to have a spiritual Ramadan, caught up with the daily grind that comes with life. Late one night, I drove from my home in the South Bay to Muslim Community Center East Bay in the Tri-Valley area. I had heard a lot about her overnight women-only qiyams, but never experienced one. It turned out to be a treat, a feast for the mind, body, and soul. Her smiling countenance was a ray of sunshine, her voice profoundly beautiful. I felt shrouded in sisterhood, companionship, and faith all at once. I get goosebumps every time I recall that night. She's an MD, a practicing psychiatrist, as well as an associate professor at Stanford School of Medicine. She's the founder of Muslims and Mental Health Lab at Stanford. She's pursued classical Islamic studies in Damascus. She's been a professor of Islamic law at Zaytuna, and she's a director at the Rahma Institute. Let us speak with Ustaza Rania Awad. Assalamu alaikum, Ustaza.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I'm doing very well. You know, I did my Ramadan nights, my COVID Ramadan nights with Rahma Foundation.
Alhamdulillah.
And seeing you just looking just the same with this background and having you to myself feels like such an honor. I never knew I'd be speaking with you one-on-one.
MashaAllah, it's my honor and pleasure. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
All right, so we have limited time, so I'm going to shoot questions at you.
Sounds good.
Okay, why should we care about mental health?
We should care about mental health because, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we should care about it because our deen tells us to. Islam is a holistic religion and incorporates all aspects, mind, body, soul, and you can't take any one of them apart. Mental health is part and parcel of that. We were the very first to create the mental health hospitals and institutions of healing in Islamic world, actually for all of humanity, because Islam inspired us to do so. So if we do not care about mental health, then we're forgetting something very important and dear to our tradition. And we're also neglecting the very reality of what we're living in. We're in the middle of a pandemic. How can we not care about mental health?
Makes sense. Makes sense. Why? How were you successfully able to establish a Muslim mental health lab at Stanford? What stake does Stanford have in this?
It's been a long road, mashallah. I think when I first tried to propose this at Stanford where I trained, they all sort of said, okay, if you feel like that's important, go ahead and do so. But the reality is now that they're very much supportive of that. I'm very thankful for that spot to be able to, really create this lab, which is an academic resource for the Muslim community, largely nationally and internationally, on mental health and on Islamic psychology. And Stanford has been supportive, even though this is a pioneering kind of situation where this is the very first academic lab in the country such as this.
Yes, so I'm thinking there's the dual challenge of number one, establishing mental health, which is in general a taboo topic and an invisible illness, and then getting Stanford to recognize that for the Muslim community. Mashallah, you're scaling heights, many, many heights. Alhamdulillah.
With the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all of your du'as.
Alhamdulillah. What is the connection between spirituality and mental health?
They're very much intertwined and connected, although we do need to recognize that all aspects of healing need to come into the picture. The spiritual, absolutely, but also the biological, the environmental, the physical, all of it has to be part of our treatments. And why I say this is because we know as a Muslim community, sometimes we tend to go into, well, if we just had enough faith or prayed harder or better, we wouldn't have these struggles that we're having. And while for some, that is true, and for some people that's partially true, it is not all the way true. And I think it's very important to recognize what Islam recognizes, genetics and biology and environment, in attributing, to aspects of mental health and care. So they are connected, but it's not the only aspect of mental health. And that's what I want to make really clear.
I appreciate that. So what do you have to say to people who say, sister, you're not praying hard enough, or you need to, just focus on your piety and maybe, neglect, it's okay. It's okay. The domestic abuse or the domestic violence, just, pray hard. What do you say to that?
It's very problematic. Again, we're neglecting the very origins of Islam that have not only given women their rights in an unfounded, unprecedented way, but also we're neglecting the very fact that, the way of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not to, bury your head as an ostrich in the sand. You can't do that. You have to deal with the actual issues at hand. If his sunnah was merely to tell all of his sahaba and sahabiyat, just pray it off, then maybe we should do the same. But that wasn't his tradition. His tradition was actually to take things head on, including actual treatments, even medications when needed. And I think we need to remember our origins and our history.
Alhamdulillah. And then last question, because I like to play devil's advocate. So I'm going to quote Karl Marx, who said, "Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people." What are you going to say to Karl Marx?
If Karl Marx was here today, which he isn't and hasn't lived through this pandemic we're living through, I would wonder if he would change his mind. Possibly not. However, I would have to say something really important, to folks who think like Karl Marx, which is that, let's take it from a non-Muslim source altogether. The Pew Research Center did a study right after, this is about a year ago, right after COVID, the pandemic started in quarantine, figuring out how Americans in general were dealing with their coping with this pandemic, and they found an unprecedented number, an increase that was twofold, of people who were reaching out, who had no religion or interest in God or religion, reaching out to religion and spirituality and the divine to get them through this pandemic. So I don't know if we call that the opium when it seems like what it is actually the kind of support you need when you feel like the whole world has come to a standstill because of the pandemic, and you're reaching to something much greater than you that actually reminds us of who's really in charge here. MashaAllah.
Jazakallah khair, Ustaza Rania. I am ever so grateful for your time and your company. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Alhamdulillah, my pleasure and honor. Thank you so much, Munira.
Wa alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
I'm now turning to my second guest, Amelah El-Amin, a mother, grandmother, an African-American Muslim human rights activist. She's been serving the Oakland community for over 25 years and is co-founder of Mu'eed, whose goal is to promote humanity on an individual, family, and community level. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. It's raining outside. I am doing wonderful.
Good.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
So I was looking up, your work with Mu'eed and otherwise. You're a native Oaklander. Is that the word?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Oaklandian.
I'm from the town.
You're from the town, the O town. Good. All right. I'll try and make the most of our 6 minutes together, or my precious 6 minutes. Why did you find Mu'eed?
Why did we found Mu'eed? Subhanallah, Bismillah. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of this event. I'd like to thank you for hosting us. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists. And I'd also like to thank those who are viewing. Mu'eed was co-founded about 25 years ago. And me and myself and the other co-founders, we decided that it was incumbent upon us to be the change we wanted to see in our community. And Mu'eed means the restorer. And so we are committed to striving to restore those things that we see that are missing or need to be restored in our community. So that was the essence of why we founded Mu'eed.
Tell me about a challenging day at work.
A challenging day at work is there's never enough. We never have enough to give, no matter how much we have. And we have some great donors, and we have, the resources that are needed are just endless. And so that's what makes it hard, is that at some point you're going to run out of whatever you're trying to share with people. And the need is so great. And to have to tell someone, I'm sorry, we don't have any more meals, or no, that was our last hygiene kit, or, it's hard. And so that's the hardest, that's the most challenging, is having enough resources to just day in and day out, just give.
And it was probably very, very hard during the pandemic.
I'm going to be honest, during the pandemic, it's kind of like Ramadan. The pandemic we've just been having Ramadan all year, right? Because during Ramadan, we're going to get so many donations, and everybody's going to want to feed the homeless, and everybody's going to be trying to get that 700 for one deed, And the pandemic brought that kind of spirit, the same kind of spirit that comes in the holiday time, where there's so many organizations out there feeding the people. The pandemic, I believe the homeless has been taken care of. I think they're subhanAllah, what has been put in place for our unhoused community and our elders, by the cities and by the state, has been amazing. And it lets us know what we can do if we choose to do it.
Okay. So every month needs to be like Ramadan.
Every month needs to be like Ramadan. Yes. For all those who don't celebrate Ramadan, every month needs to be like Christmas.
Is it hard to do your work because you're a woman and a woman of color?
When I was thinking about that earlier, I was thinking, Allah is Ar-Rahman, right? And then we're told in Islam that the woman's womb is attached to the throne of the Ar-Rahman, right? And so Allah has created us and me as a nurturer. So, it's just my nature to want to nurture, and then as a woman of color, I know that the struggle is real, and I know what it means to be treated with dignity, even though you're struggling, and to not be treated like you should just be grateful, and we should just be grateful, but you should, and we should, when we provide a service, provide the service in a way in which we want to be served. And so I think being a woman and a Black woman gives me an advantage.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Sister Amelah, Jazakallah khair for your time. Thank you for the service that you do. May Allah bless your work with abundance, billionfold. May every month feel like Ramadan, and may every Muslim want to partake of the blessings that you give them the opportunity to partake of. Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah, wa yakum, alhamdulillah.
Take care, my dear. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I'm now turning to my next guest for the evening. A long time ago, when I was a fresh graduate from college and new to the Bay Area, I was looking for my niche, my kind of people in the Bay Area, which I now called home. My husband, who knew the Bay Area better than I did, introduced me not to any friends, but an organization called Islamic Networks Group, or ING. What, dear husband, said I, do you like about this organization? Never before them have I seen Islam presented on slides. And mind you, 20 years ago, ING was using literal slides and an overhead projector to talk about Islam. While my corporate type husband appreciated the slides, I fell in love with the way ING let the beauty of Islam shine through for a primarily non-Muslim audience. That was also the beginning of my friendship with Maha Elgenaidi, who I have come to admire over the years for her hard work ethic, her fierce leadership, and her survival while working for a Muslim community that can be hard to work with. Maha is the founder and chief innovation officer of Islamic Networks Group. Needless to say, she's been recognized with numerous awards around citizenship, community, and civil rights. Assalamu alaikum, Maha.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you doing, dear friend?
Wonderful, generous introduction, Munira.
Alhamdulillah, it wasn't a typical bio, was it?
I did not know the story about why Amr was, liked the organization. It's so funny because the current CEO of the organization it had exactly the same sentiments. She was so impressed by the fact that we're actually presenting Islam in slides. And
now it's streaming.
So funny.
Good. All right, Maha, let's get to the meat and potatoes.
Sure.
Tell me about the founding of ING.
Sure. So the organization honestly was something that happened by inspiration. I read the Quran for the first time in my life about 30 years ago. And two inspirations came to me. One was, why didn't I know the truth about Islam before then? Because at the time I held many of the same stereotypes that many Americans have about Islam and Muslims. I thought that Islam, for example, was very misogynistic, biased towards Christians and Jews, that hijab was oppressive, etc. And so reading the Quran for the first time 30 years ago helped me understand that a lot of that was not true, just the opposite, in fact. And the second inspiration that I had was that Muslims themselves needed to go out there and teach about Islam and engage with Americans of other faith. And that's exactly what we do at ING. We teach about Islam in the public square, which is always a challenge. And we do it through Muslim speakers alongside our allies from other faith and ethnic communities.
I remember speaking with you once in one of our many one-on-ones. You said, I was attracted to Islam because of its beauty.
Yeah.
Can you talk more to that?
Well, Islam for me is more of a spiritual path and a practice that brings us closer to God, our Creator. And when we have an intimate relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're not only at peace with ourselves and our circumstances, regardless of what they are, but we're also agents for good in this world. So Alhamdulillah, when I first became a practicing Muslim, I studied with phenomenal scholars. And, and I learned the beauty of Islam, and I developed my faith practice first and foremost, and the cultivation of, hopefully, of good character. And that's really what guides me in my work. And that's what I would say is the most beautiful thing about the religion and the faith. Mm-hmm.
Summarize for us what ING does.
We teach about Islam, and we engage with Americans of other religious and ethnic backgrounds. In a nutshell, that's what we do. All of our programs do this in different ways, using different strategies. So we do it in the context of countering Islamophobia. And so we work alongside other groups that are experiencing bigotry. We do it in the context of religious pluralism. So we work alongside other faith groups. We do it in dialogue, in bringing people together. So essentially, we're essentially teaching about Islam and Muslims, and we also do cultural competency work in law enforcement, primarily in corporations and healthcare facilities, in district offices. But in a nutshell, that's really what we do. We teach.
Mm-hmm. Are you optimistic about the future of Islam and Muslims in America, given the new administration?
Given the new administration, absolutely. I think this administration has been incredible in terms of its openness. We've already talked with them about doing trainings on Islamophobia and countering Islamophobia across federal agencies. So we're excited about that. We did the same kind of work under the Obama administration, and I personally was in Washington, D.C. at least once a month. So I'm expecting to do the same thing again with other speakers, of course. And we've also talked with the White House about going back to the Know Your Neighbor program and expanding it even further now that the nation has become far more polarized than ever before. So we're very excited. And things have really changed. I mean, I think that the interfaith movement was started to get really strong after 9/11, and it's just grown exponentially. And what's really exciting is that Muslims are leaders in the interfaith movement now. ING is one of those leaders, thanks to supporters like Amr and you, Munira. And we've started programs in interfaith religious literacy, in work that we're doing with the Jewish community around studying our scriptures and learning, for example, about the Exodus story from both of our perspectives and so forth. So things have changed on the ground, and I think that we can leverage all of those wonderful things that Muslims have been able to accomplish since 9/11 under the Obama administration, and we can take it further under the Biden administration, we hope.
Mm-hmm. Last question, Maha. Did you choose your path, or did your path choose you?
Oh gosh, there is. That's a great question. So I was. My degree is in political science, as you all know, and economics, and I studied engineering before then. And I was in the corporate world for 6 years, and I had absolutely no plans to do anything in the nonprofit world, and I wasn't even thinking about it. And it wasn't really until I read the Quran that I had a religious experience that led me here. So I think it absolutely chose me. This wasn't part of my career path or plan whatsoever. And I try to explain that to people, is that this is truly inspired work. And I'm so grateful to God and feel really, truly blessed to be doing the work that I'm doing.
And jazakallah for sharing it with us. Really appreciate that. Thank you for doing all that you do, Maha.
Thank you so much, Munira, and thank you to Amr as well.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Okay, my next guest. Maheen Ahmed is currently the Legislative Director for Assemblymember Rob Bonta in the California State Assembly. She crafts and oversees a progressive budget and policy priorities on a wide range of issues impacting Californians. She's a community builder, organizer, and youth empowerer. Assalamu alaikum, Maheen. How are you?
Alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Okay, what does a legislative director at a state assembly do?
Yeah, so as a legislative director, I basically oversee the policy and budget priorities that the assembly member who I work for, Assemblymember Rob Bonta, he represents Alameda, Oakland, and San Leandro in the Bay Area. Basically, anything that he wants to do and what we're seeing on the ground in our communities that our communities need, I help to oversee and craft all the bills that we try to get passed into law. Usually we have about 25 or so, and then we ask for funding for our communities as well. So I oversee a team of our legislative aides and try to see that happen.
Okay. Very nice. Why do, Maheen, why does an average citizen, if there is something such as an average citizen, tend to care more about what their congressperson in Washington, D.C. or the senator in Washington, D.C. is doing when the policies and the laws that are made in the state capitol are perhaps more directly affecting our lives on a day-to-day basis? Why do we care so much about D.C. versus Sacramento?
No, I appreciate that you mentioned that these policies impact us more directly, because that's the issue. I don't think a lot of people realize that our state policy is that impactful, our local policies are that impactful. We see, of course, we saw these past 4 years were very, very difficult at the federal level and did impact our community heavily. But there are so many policies at the state level that actually do dictate our daily lives, what our children study in our classrooms, in school, when we do go back to school in the pandemic. All these things are actually at the local level and at the state level. So I think it's about political education, about understanding the government system. I think we have a lack of that in our communities. The civic engagement is very, very necessary. And I think, just meeting with our elected officials more and understanding who our representatives are and what they're really doing.
Do you think the Muslim community is organized enough? Do they get it?
I think there are various sectors. Our Muslim community, alhamdulillah, is so diverse. I will have to say, our Black Muslim community has always been on the front lines. And to lump them in with the rest of the Muslim community, I think is a disservice, because they're the ones that are leading us in our community organizing work. And then, those of us who are coming from these immigrant communities are definitely following that path, and it's slow. But I think my generation, alhamdulillah, is trying to get there as well. I think it has to do with the various privileges that we bring with our communities. A lot of us don't realize that the basic needs for housing and food and insecurities, food insecurities, things like that, are things that our Muslim community deals with as well. But I think maybe the majority may not deal with those, insecurities, so they may not feel the need to organize at that level. But I think we're getting there. I'm hopeful, and that's what I'm hoping to do in the work in my life as well, to help us get to that point. Inshallah.
What are some of the burning issues that Californians are currently faced with?
I mean, with the pandemic, there's so much going on, right? There's, like I mentioned, housing is a huge issue that we're facing. I think racial injustices, we see that happening with law enforcement. We see that happening even with how vaccines are distributed, how testing for COVID was happening, which communities are getting what resources first. There's a lot education-wise as well, ethnic studies. There's a curriculum that's being put forward. Are we watching what is included in there? Things like that. I think there's so much that we have to pay attention to at the state level, and it may not impact the Muslim community directly as we think as a Muslim issue, but I would argue that they do, because Muslim issues are all issues that impact our community members, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. So a lot going on that we should be watching and paying attention to.
I love that you said Muslim issues are all issues. And that's one message that I'd love for the audience to take away from our conversation tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Jazakallah, Maheen. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. My next guest, she was elected to the Hayward City Council in November 2018 and then voted mayor pro tempore or vice mayor by her colleagues in 2020. Her resume is extensive. I've picked some of the accolades listed on there, In 2020, she was the Alameda Labor Council's Woman to Reckon With. In 2019, the East Bay Young Democrats named her the Local Legislator of the Year. In 2018, CSU East Bay named her among their 40 under 40. In 2017, San Francisco Business Times named her Most Influential Women in Bay Area Business. And in 2016, Senator Bob Wieckowski honored her with the Unity Award. Let's talk to Hayward City Council member Aisha Wahab.
Thank you, Munira John. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Council member?
Good. I'm very honored to be here. I apologize. I've been having some technical difficulties all day with my computer, so I can't turn on my camera.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much for giving us your time tonight. We know you're really busy. Council member, what's a typical day at work like?
Honestly, I start off the morning. I have an actual job, so a 9 to 5, if you will. It usually starts around 7:30, ends roughly a little bit before 5. And then if we have a council meeting, we have closed session starting at 5, ends at roughly about 7. Council meeting starts at 7, ends probably around 11:30, sometimes later at midnight or 1. And that's a typical day. And then any other day, we normally have meetings throughout, the evening, spread out throughout the week. A lot of reading over the weekends, things like that. So it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding work.
So 80 hours a week, no big deal. That's your typical lifestyle.
Pretty much, yeah.
Very nice. So on a serious note, on a very, very serious note, I'd like to quote something that I read in a 2018 KQED interview of yours, where you say, "I'm born and raised here. My entire family is here. It's all I know. I speak English. I'm educated here. I want to serve my community. So when am I going to be seen as American?" Tell us what you mean by that.
Oftentimes when we see the news and the way that the media kind of reports and displays Afghan Americans or Muslims or any immigrant community, it's often with a negative lens. It's often a lens of struggle. It's often a lens of ignorance or lesser than. And oftentimes when we see things that happen in the news that's negative, we all hope that it's not trying to portray us in some negative way. I'm sure all of us have seen that, heard that, felt that. And I think I often tell within the Afghan American community that, many of us were born here. I highly doubt that the majority of us will ever return to our ancestral home, if you will. We are American. We were born here, raised here, educated here. We are American. And my frustration sometimes is, when are we going to be seen as American enough? Whether we, wear the hijab, whether we don't, whether our skin color is white, black, tan, somewhere in between, or, if we speak a language that with our grandparents, that is the beauty of America. We all belong.
I have another quote from the same interview where you say, "If you don't see the woman, be the woman." Tell us more about that.
Definitely. And I think that, in the city of Hayward, I was extremely frustrated with the lack of action on affordable housing. A lot of the community members here in Hayward are lower income, and they're struggling, especially with the growing housing costs. This is pre-COVID, obviously, so we have other housing issues right now. And I was just taking a look at, who's going to do this, who's going to champion what we need to hear, whether it's on mental health, whether it's on housing, whether it's on, public safety, whatever the case may be. Sometimes stop looking for the person to do it and just do it yourself. So if you don't see the woman, be the woman. So that's really where it comes from.
What inspires your work every day?
Honestly, I want to help people. That comes in so many different ways, whether it's, getting a coffee for a sibling or, just being kind to somebody and listening to their problems, or passing, significant policies that help people, how can I help somebody, right? That's how I live my life. That's how I try to do my work every single day, not only in my professional work, but then also my counsel and policy work. So it's just asking yourself that particular question. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Would you ever run for state assembly?
I am very much interested in state policies. I think that, to our previous speakers' comments, what happens at the state also limits what we can do locally. So I think that's incredibly important for people to understand that some of the housing restrictions, it's because of the state. Some of the educational requirements, and as we talked about ethnic studies, it's because of the state. What is happening there, right? What can we do at the state level to really affect every single aspect of our lives, right? Whether it's minimum wage, whether it's transportation, infrastructure, technology, it all happens at the state, it happens locally, and it happens nationwide. So regardless, again, at a larger level, I would definitely be interested in working on state policies.
Excellent. Well, you will find us supporting you wholeheartedly, inshallah, for that next stage in your career.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye-bye. My next guest. Way back when our children were younger, she and I together were organizers of play dates and Quran classes for our children. Then she moved on to become a massive community organizer. If you are one of her nearly 1,600 Facebook friends, hardly a day will go by for you when she will not have asked you to sign a petition, call a city council member to vote a certain way on a legislation, support this person or that person for state assembly, or to stand up to multinational corporations. If she's not doing any of that, Samina Usman is attending some Stop the Hate rally. Let's talk to Samina, Government Relations Coordinator at CAIR San Francisco Bay Area and board member for Secure Justice and Sacred Heart Community Foundation.
Assalamu alaikum.
Samina, how are you?
Good. Jazakallah khair for hosting this program. You're doing an excellent job, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. So happy to be interacting with all my great friends and sisters tonight. Okay. So questions for you, Samina. What does a government relations officer coordinator do?
So yeah, we do a variety of things. So I end up interfacing with elected officials on the city level, county, state, and federal levels, and we work on a variety of different issues that impact the Muslim community. And I meet with elected officials regularly to, I meet with them in order to help influence policy, whether it be to encourage them to vote in favor of a piece of legislation or to actually introduce it. So alhamdulillah, we've been actively involved with trying to push a few pieces of legislation on the state-wide level, and actually worked with Maheen as well on that. And so, and then I also want to make sure that community members also get that opportunity to meet with elected officials. So I bring them for my meetings because, yes, it's important for them to learn about the issues, from a community organization, but honestly, they are more interested in hearing from constituents themselves, because those are the people who are really going to keep them in office. So I'm just one person, but the constituent is incredibly important, and that's why we do that. And then we also, work on campaigns in a variety of ways, whether it be through setting up meetings, letter writing campaigns, through action alerts, or speaking at different council meetings, or different hearings, such as the what Aisha had mentioned about the ethnic studies issue that's going to be happening later on this week.
Have you ever reached out to someone in government and they've said, sorry, but we're not interested in meeting with you?
Oh, that happens quite often, unfortunately. But at the same time, I kill them with kindness. Or I just, I'm a little bit persistent. And alhamdulillah, I end up getting a meeting with them. I think I've met with every single congressional member in the Bay Area. And I think the vast majority of all the state assembly members and state senators, city council members, I meet with a number of them, mainly in Santa Clara County or in Alameda County, and then some in different areas as well. But sometimes, oftentimes you end up having council members that have, or elected officials that have heard negative things about Islam or CAIR and have been a little bit reluctant to meet with us, but then, you know, we show them what the reality is, and we often are able to work on a number of pieces of legislation.
When you put out a call to action, pick up the phone and call your congressperson or sign this petition, how responsive are people?
I mean, it can be challenging because I think that this is new for a lot of people, and that's why it's important to get community members comfortable with either calling different offices or meeting with elected officials or writing a letter. So I think that once people start to become a little bit more comfortable, they actually even set up meetings with council members or elected officials themselves. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I love that. I mean, this is part of community power building. And so, but, you know, oftentimes it can be a little bit daunting, or honestly, people are really busy with their lives, with their children, with their work. But the thing is that each of these different actions have an impact. So, you know, even that 1 minute that it takes to sign that action alert, that's incredibly helpful, because sometimes elected officials, they're like conflicted about whether or not they're going to be supporting or opposing a piece of legislation, and they'll look to see how many letters did they receive from the community members, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, well, look, we got like 600 letters saying support this or don't support this. And so that really helps with trying to push legislation. And also, I'm sorry, and also in terms of getting community members to join meetings, that is really helpful. And I'm so thankful for the number of community members who joined, including also your mother-in-law and father-in-law. They've joined a meeting with me with the 7-member Alex Lee. So I've always been really appreciative of that, and it's really helpful.
Alhamdulillah. So I see that you bring your children along to protests and demonstrations. Is that a conscious decision?
Yes. Well, I think, it's for 2 reasons. One, it's really hard to find babysitters, and it's really pricey too. And I'm like, do I really want to spend $100 on a babysitter and be 5 hours or 4 hours or whatever away from my children? Because sometimes I have to drive in traffic all the way to like Berkeley or Richmond or, you know, Oakland or whatnot. And it's a lot. So I'm very thankful that my children, they understand that this is important, and it's an opportunity for me to kind of share with them about the pieces of legislation, about things that are impacting different communities, about, you know, why it's important for us to show up. So, you know, alhamdulillah, now they're older, I can leave them at home, but even then, I actually do want them to come out for things. Like my daughter and I, we went to the Stop API Hate rally just on Saturday, and it was really important, you know, for her to see this mass gathering of people coming together in solidarity to speak out against hate.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a win-win situation. It's a lifetime of education.
Mm-hmm.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Good stuff. Jazakallah, Samina, for your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. When she shared her resume with me, she proudly declared, first and upfront, that she's a mother of 6, a mother-in-law to 3 more, a wife who'd taken care of a sick husband for 11 years, all the while starting nonprofits, sitting on masjid and school education boards, and later getting certified in data science and data visualization, helping develop STEAM curriculum at Edvon. Most recently, she's a board member and strategic advisor at the startup Zen Space. I know Reshma Heather as a beloved neighbor, community member, and consistent supporter of my daughter's Girl Scout cookie sales. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. What memories. Who doesn't love Girl Scout cookies? And your daughter, mashallah, mashallah.
Thanks to supporters like yourself. How are you doing? Okay. All right. Let's dive straight into the questions, Reshma. Why should Muslim women pursue STEM careers?
First of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul 'uqdatan min lisani. I'm very, very thankful for all the speakers that were above and beyond before me. And as you can see, I think all of them mentioned STEM, and they're all Muslim women. So before I start, I just wanted to just clarify, STEM is no longer STEM, it's STEAM, and it's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, access to STEAM degrees impacts earnings. And for Muslim women, it is definitely something that I champion for girls to look into STEAM careers for the long-term sustainability. In 2019, according to the Bureau, the STEM careers actually went up 6% of all the 163 million jobs, 10 million jobs were of STEM. And the median wages for STEM majors were around 86,000 compared to the other wages that were around 38,000. So you can see it's a significant impact. As a Muslim woman, I have grown up with the concept of never separating my religion from science, because I grew up in a Muslim country, and from day one, I was taught that Quran and Sunnah incorporate science. And as shepherds for the universe and for the earth, you can just open up Quran and read all the relevance that is in there within the Quran to science. And with that concept, I grew up knowing science as part of my curriculum, part of my studies, and I was lucky to go to study in one of the very, very famous institutes in India called Aligarh Muslim University, a biochemistry major. There also, I actually studied biochemistry and always looked at science as part of my faith. When I moved to the States 30 years ago, I noticed that my career was again championed and being promoted. And with that, I started looking into changing my degree. I took a Bachelor's of Science in Finance and Accounting, which involved a lot of mathematics. And once I became a mom, I got involved with school and realized that STEM and STEAM was part and parcel of my life. And mashallah, now with 6 kids, 3 of them being in STEM careers, I feel like there is significant interest in science for girls. As we can see now, mashallah, we have a vice president who's a female. With COVID, we cannot ignore the fact, the importance of STEM and science. Our own Sarah Cody was leading the Santa Clara, efforts for COVID. And I think she was a great role model for girls who would like to aspire for STEM careers. But for me personally, I think there's a lot of hope and avenues for Muslim girls to go into STEM careers. There's so much opportunity with all that's happening around us as consumers, as well as leaders in innovation and technology. I think there is a lot of room for Muslim women to chart the way and just lead.
What is it like to serve? And by the way, quick warning to my audience, mashallah, Reshma's resume is so varied. My questions for her may seem discreet, but they're related to one person, believe it or not. What is it like to serve as a Muslim parent on a school education board?
Well, I first of all, now I feel like I'm just an American parent, and I fit a little gap for representing. I usually am found in spaces where I don't see any other Muslims, so that's why it's really nice that if I'm there at a board meeting or a PTA board meeting or the education board meeting, I usually take a lot of weight on my shoulder for representing the rest of the Muslim community. And you're right, I play a lot of roles. Like before this meeting, I was actually in a curriculum building for the California State Education for Health, and that's up and coming and developing. And I'm helping with a bunch of Muslim women develop a parenting tool to supplement the education that's being provided for the health and upbringing for California children. So California Healthy Kids Act. But Muslims, we need to be aware. And as Desi parents, I am a Desi parent, I'm from India and Pakistan. We grew up in a very different mindset where when our parents dropped us off at school, that was it. They would never come to school. The teachers would take care. And moving to America and being in the public school, I was just shocked to see that I'm expected to, cover 5-6 hours every day or 5 to 6 hours every week in the school, because that's what the understanding for the education system was, that, parents do not abandon their kids. They go to the school, they're part and parcel of the public school system. Although our taxpayer money pays for most of the infrastructure, but the healthy upbringing of a child is when they see the parent involved in the school. And for me, I had 3 kids 1 year apart. In fact, as of today, I have a 27, 28, 29-year-old. So imagine them in school together, 3 kids in school. I volunteered to be the science chair. And from then onwards, I was inspiring the school to run science fairs. Sitting in the board meetings, I would also always be the voice championing STEM, especially STEM for girls, because there was an underlying discrimination for girls from day one. Somehow we're in 2021, yet the girls are always encouraged to take non-STEM careers, very unconventional or typical roles that even in the Desi community, we put ourselves in a box where you're seen as a girl, a daughter, sister, a mom. And that carries on here to this day, where girls in school are not encouraged to go to STEM careers. And I would sit at the board meeting and be that voice and fight for having science fair mandatory, or having equal participation of women and men. And I can see how it impacts, because it's been 20 years, 22 years actually, in the same school. And mashallah, some of the children that I worked with in school, that were not just Muslim kids, every kid, who worked in the science fields or science fair, you can see them having those careers and sustainable ways of living. And a couple of things that I did, which was very, very inspiring under the Obama, and I'm hoping that it will be under the same Biden administration, was the effort of bringing earth sustainability, knowledge of, conservative, not the sustainable ways of, restoring earth and protecting earth. All of these were programs that I helped in our school, thanks to President Obama. And I can see the results of those children at that time in the school are now turning out to be the champions and spearheading ways of having the electrical automobile industry innovation there, or even just simple ways of sustainable growth in every field.
I'm going to ask a question that may seem unrelated, but I have a feeling it has to do with the gender divide. You mentioned in your resume that you survived as the only woman on a masjid board. Why did you use the word survive?
First of all, you did good investigation. So I before I came into corporate world, I actually served in nonprofits. I founded the first helpline for battered women, and I studied business. And one of my core subjects was studying nonprofits and nonprofit accounting. And so out of curiosity, I started looking up all the nonprofits locally in the Bay. So I went through the board minutes and the board, the registration for nonprofits and the masajid, and I found out most of the mosques in the masjid in the local Bay Area did not allow women to run for the board positions, and I questioned that. So when the time came when our masjid was being built, the constitution was written, and thanks to many of the pioneers, there was no ruling such as not to have a female on the board. So I actually ran. I was nominated by some of the local leaders, and I joined the board without even thinking that I might end up being the only female with 11 men. And it was very tough. And the word I used, survive, was that it's hard to be in that position and be the voice, and especially in a religious setting where you might want, because of mom, I'm a mother of boys, I faced a lot of backlash, just like in many other organizations. But for being a Muslim woman in a masjid and being the only one was a tough situation to overcome, especially when you're trying to speak with, again, representing the rest of the women in the community, whether it was a zakat allocation or starting a second khutbah after school for children. Like, I was told that it's not a space where I would dictate whether a sermon should be given after school for children, or even the structure, construction. I've been in construction and real estate as well. So when the masjid was being built, I was told I had no voice to say in, whether a masjid should be a certain architectural design, or So there was a lot of struggles, and I survived. But I would use the word survive because many times you feel like quitting because it's a non-value add, selfless job. You become like Teflon, where nothing sticks to you. You just let it go. And that was my survival skill
Reshma, when
during
you, I'm
during that time.
so unfortunate that I have only 6 minutes with you. But when you write your autobiography, I will be first in line to purchase a signed copy.
Inshallah. Well, wish me luck. I'm in a different way right now. I'm providing the on-demand workspaces, which is
Jazakallah.
out of COVID. But thank you so much, Munira, and I really, really appreciate your, digging deep into my background. And I would love to actually have someone else write something after I pass away, but love to explore what you're up to because you're many faces for the Bay Area Muslim women, and I would love to introduce you and your background too.
Let's do coffee
Inshallah.
someday. Let's do coffee
Inshallah.
in a
Inshallah.
vaccinated world. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you. According to her Twitter page, she's a rapper, fashionista, founder, educator, Muslimah, speaker, revolutionary. Her Twitter handle, Hijabi Chronicles, has the tagline, unafraid, unapologetic. Muslimah creatives inspiring change through our art and expression. Let us meet Alia Sharif. Assalamu alaikum, Alia. How are you? You're muted.
Walaikum assalam. Hey, how are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for patiently waiting for your turn. It's been a long night.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you for the beautiful intro, mashallah. And it's nothing to wait. Shout out to all of the sisters who shared space on the stage. It's really amazing to see us all come together in this month. So shout out my sister Amelah, girl, from the town, Northern California. Shout out Samina. I see you all the time out here. So alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you. So I learned a lot about you today. I watched you on your on TED Salon. And I'm very intrigued by all that you do and how you talk about your family. Tell us what it was like growing up as the daughter of an activist and the grandchild of a civil rights activist.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for watching my TED Talk. That meant a lot. TED Talk actually hit me up to come to New York directly and speak upon my grandma and my family and their role. So alhamdulillah, being the daughter of an activist and a grandchild of an activist has always been like an honor. As a Muslim, we're already taught right from wrong and some moralities and things about humanity. But I feel like when you look greater upon the issues that are in the world, you see that not only does Islam go right inside as far as justice and freedom and human rights, but to have a strong Black mother who has come from the civil rights movement, who has been racially discriminated her whole life from Mississippi. So it was going down. So to get that insight of the world, she was the first person to show me what it looked like to have a human crime, like a crime against humanity. So knowing that as a young person, it helped me navigate in the world on a moral standpoint and just doing it for the people. Power to the people.
Very nice. Tell me about your relationship with your grandmother per se, because you mention her a lot in your TED Talk.
Yeah, my grandmother, she was really big in Mississippi herself. She was an activist, civil rights leader. She was a part of the bus boycotts with Martin Luther King. My grandmother was really a stone for me and my mother, a milestone in our writing, our activism, our worldly look at life. My grandma went through a lot, and that's why voting was really important to her, because she was, sprayed with those hoses. And my grandfather was stabbed, and my great uncle, was stabbed in the chest with a pin for sitting at a colored section, a non-colored section. My great grandfather experienced racism throughout his whole entire life, from the KKK to the houses being burnt down. So my grandmother always gave us a full perspective. And as a Muslim, I think it's really important, because sometimes in this ummah, I think we could get so caught up with, what is just A, B, C, and D, when we don't allow ourselves to realize there's a universal struggle right now, and we're all going through it. And one thing about being a Muslim, we know that it's not just being a Muslim that's going to get you to heaven. It's being a good person and doing good deeds. So seeing that from my grandmother and literally listening to her advice and listening to her story to help me map my world and where I was going was always a beautiful thing. So our relationship was good. And one thing I also want to say about our relationship it's the strength she gave me. My grandma had a lot of game. So she would give me power and empowerment. So if I brought her a problem, she didn't just, sit there and willow and, it was like, okay, what are we going to do? We have the power, we have our voice, we have ourselves, we have our representation. How are we going to fix this? So it was never like defeat. Even if it was an internal win, it was still a victory knowing that you didn't give up.
Why did you found Hijabi Chronicles?
Hijabi Chronicles was a group that I founded because in 2014, when it started, there was no platform for Muslim women in hip hop. There was no really accepting hip hop platform for us that was cool with us being Muslim and artists. We were always getting stereotyped, putting in a box. And then our own community was breaking us down for, doing music. So it was really difficult to maintain just the identity as a hip hop artist and a Muslim. It just was always something. If it wasn't from one side, it was from the other. So we decided to start Hijabi Chronicles, and we had our first concert in Berkeley in 2014. It starred all Muslim women, from hip hop artists to spoken word. Also, Sister Amelah, shout out, she was there and performed. We had a fashion show. We had a Q&A, a panel, and we kept it really in the guidelines of Islam. So we got a lot of news coverage. We went viral with that, and that's really how it began. And we called it Hijabi Chronicles because it's chronicles within us as women, with hijab or without hijab, or coming to it and leaving it. It's so many stories that aren't told. So we wanted to invite our sisters from the hood and also from the streets and from our areas and, the real culture to come and see what we're talking about.
Tell us about the creative process.
My creative process in regards to just making anything in general, I think experience is always something that is going to be lead when you go through things. It's really good to express it and write it. And knowledge, one of the elements of hip hop, which is the fifth element, is knowledge. And I think it's when you know what you're doing, you know better, you do better. So my process and what inspires me is knowing that I have the ability to really change somebody's world with just a sentence or two. And, they may happen to rhyme and be over a beat, but it's a powerful, powerful weapon, which is just your words.
Your grandma told you to pencil whip them.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
She sure did. Yeah, pencil whip them. Basically, one day I was having issues in school, and I was like, Grandma, the teacher, she's not listening. And, and then there was also some bullying going on because I wore my hijab in elementary school. So I just had all this, fury in me. And she just was like, you know what? Calm down. Use your words as your power. Use your voice as your tool. Instead of getting physical and getting angry and taking it out, more so use that with your ideas, your creativity. So she was like, pencil whip them, tell them what you're talking about. So I actually was able to start writing poetries about, my experiences in elementary school. So pencil whip them was the lead to literally my way of using music, words, poetry, power as freedom and empowerment.
I want, Alia, if I may, I want to speak with my audience while I have you on the screen. It almost feels like I'm shortchanging the artist in you by doing an interview when you're really a performer. So I want, this is bland for you to be on screen and just to be talking to me about the process. I want the audience to know that you can look up Alia Sharif. Her name is on there. And look her up in TED Salon. And you also have a channel with your performances. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, check out my YouTube. You guys follow me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on everything. I have a new project about to drop. So YouTube and Instagram are my two main ones. And if you're on Clubhouse, you guys already know what's popping.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alia.
Thank you.
Great talking to you. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Have a good night. Okay. Her motto is From Fear to Friendship. The website of our organization, American Muslim Voice Foundation, proudly quotes Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. When I emceed her annual September 11 picnic in 2019 in downtown Palo Alto, a gentleman approached me at the end of the event to tell me that attending the peace picnic gave him closure from the trauma of September 11. He had fled the falling Twin Towers, and for a while, in the chaos, his family did not know if he was dead or alive. He thanked me profusely. Such is the healing power of that peace picnic and other events organized by none other but Samina Sundas, whom I fondly call Samina Auntie. Assalamualaikum Auntie, how are you?
Walaikum assalam, beta. I am good. And thank you for all the panelists before me. What a wonderful evening. What a blessed, wonderful evening.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Auntie, for joining us and patiently waiting to be our last guest for tonight. Tell us the story of how American Muslim Voices was born.
So in 2001, I was part of American Muslim Alliance, and we were qualifying the qualifiable Muslims to run for local offices, state offices, and federal offices. But 9/11 changed the work for American Muslim Alliance that they had been doing for 14 years. All of a sudden, Muslims were labeled as terrorists. So I realized nobody is going to vote for terrorists. So it is time to go back in the mainstream and start building relationships with our fellow Americans. So we tell our story. We don't allow the media or the administration to tell our story. That was the seed behind it. And that's why I started the organization and thought that we need to build relationships with our fellow Americans and teach them about Islam. Unlike ING, we chose much harder work because we actually bring them together and we feed them. So we thought if a man's heart you can reach through stomach, we could use the same motto and reach all Americans through their stomachs. So we started gathering them together for iftar dinners, Eid festivals, peace picnics, open houses, dialogues, you name it, and we started doing that. So they get to know us, they get to know our food, they get to know our culture, they get to know the beauty of Islam.
Why should we care about interfaith work?
So we call it multi-faith work. Multi-faith work is something I believe wholeheartedly that our beloved Prophet would have been doing if he was alive today. And our work is based on Surah Hujurat, verse 49.13, where God says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair and divided you into tribes and nations, so you may get to know each other, not that you despise each other." So we took that verse and we just thought, okay, this is something that we need to do. And that's how we started our multi-faith work and intercultural and diverse communities and all that.
What is the value of the interfaith drive for social justice?
So social justice is an important part of that. We do peace work, we do community building, but none of it is possible without justice and without social justice. And when you strive to build a beloved community, you cannot do that without having every human being, every race, religion, every people who don't have homes, people who don't have medical care, people who don't have, clothes to wear. You need to take care of that. And that was a very important part of my family. Growing up, our parents were very strict about that when a guest comes to visit, whether it is some rich person or if somebody, an old servant comes to visit you, you treat them the same way. And in Pakistan at that time, people used to cook two different things, For servants, they will cook vegetables or dals, not knowing they were the healthy part, but they thought that was the cheaper thing. So they will cook for them and they will eat chickens and meats and all that. In my home, my dad said, if we can all eat meat, we will all eat meat. But if we can all eat vegetables and beans, we will eat that. I didn't grow up in a very rich home. It was, middle class, upper middle class. But my parents really taught the value of Islam. There was not a lot of preaching. There was not a lot of strict, rules. But the spirit of Islam was practiced every single day. And that's something that I learned.
Auntie, I'm going to get philosophical on you.
Sure.
In all your life, in all your work, what have you learned about what makes humans tick? What gives them purpose and passion?
Munira, when I just read your text before you sent it to me, it really made me think about my parents, and I cried a lot today, missing them and thinking about that, what they had said. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be respected. Everybody wants to be just, touched with gentleness and with your soul. And I think if we do that, I strongly believe if Muslims practice Islam in the mainstream, we will have no problem, regardless where we live. We need to practice Islam on the streets of wherever we are, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our states, not just in our mosques. And we need to start not just mosques, we need to start soup shelters. We need to have resource centers for poor people. That's what we need to do. Masjids are open, but they are empty most of the time. Start thinking about building masjids, but right next to that, centers where we can help people. We are supposed to be the Rahmah. Let's live that, what we are supposed to be taught. We're supposed to be teaching Rahmah to other people. So that's, I know all human beings are the same. And when I started working in the mainstream, I started with one basic question. And I thought a lot about that. I started asking people, if your child's life is in danger, what would you do? 99% of the time, people said they will give their own life for their children. So that's the binding part. Let's start from there. Let's go and focus on what binds us rather than what divides us. Too many times we focus on what divides us. This is haram, this is that, this is... No, listen to our beloved Prophet. How he loved people. How he loved his enemies. If we do that, we will have no problem. We started Know Your Neighbors in 2010 in Washington, D.C. with Pete Stark, who was the congressman. He helped us launch that there. And since then, we have been doing that. And you have attended our Eid festival. That comes, one of the events that comes under Know Your Neighbors. And we do our Eid festival in December because Jewish people are doing Hanukkah, Christians are doing Christmas. So we thought, what a wonderful idea to just have that. So it's not a burden on Muslims. We can just, do that there at that time. And then, teach them about our religion, our culture, our beautiful clothes, our food, and feed them and feed them and feed them.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Really happy, Auntie, to have rounded up my conversation tonight with your soulful thoughts and ideas. Stick around. I have some questions free for all my audience. So if for all my guests, if my guests can come on, I know it's 9:20. I'll ask one or two questions for whoever is ready to take them on. Let's see who's still there. Okay, we've got Dr.Rania Awad. Maheen is still around. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Reshma's still there. Sister Amelah still there. How are you guys holding up? Jazakallah for staying back. Hey, Samina. Okay. So, Assalamualaikum, Alia. So anybody can take this question. What is your biggest fear with respect to your work, the work that you do?
I'll say what I said earlier, is not having enough to give. That is always my biggest fear, is when I'm giving, that I'm gonna run out.
Anybody else?
I think politically, I will have to say that a lot is misunderstood and misinterpreted. And, you know, in recent time in politics, more so in the last 4 years than ever before, but it's always been around, the polarization of what you're trying to achieve and the misrepresentation of what you're trying to really do. I think that's one of the biggest concerns I see. For example, housing, and then, you know, there's a lot of negative remarks around that, and who we're trying to serve and so forth. So I wouldn't say it's a fear, but more of an annoyance.
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Samina.
Sorry, I think one of my fears is, I mean, it's just that terrible legislation or policies are passed without having like enough support or opposition from the community. And, you know, especially, you know, there's a saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so I always want to make sure that we as Muslims are at the table and helping to make those decisions in order to influence that type of policy. And I want to make sure that our Muslim voices are heard, and to make sure that elected officials hear this when considering legislation that's going to impact us.
Yes, Samina.
So, you know, when I started the open house in Ramadan in 2003, we had 65 people. Now we have 350 people. And my fear is that my health is not the same. I cannot cook for hundreds of people. And we need funding and all that. And somehow it's like, you know, the sister saying, you don't have enough to give, you know, and all that. But also, you know, I like Sameena Usman said that you will be on the menu. That's why we do so many events, that we control the table. We invite others to come to our table. You know, but Samina, we are going further than that, not just, you know, be at the table. We are creating the table. And I think if all of us hold hand together and support each other and promote each other's work, rather than being competitors, let's be supportive of each other. Then we can make a huge difference. There is enough in the Bay Area, in USA, in the world, because God says there is enough. We just need to support each other.
Alhamdulillah. Did anybody else want to chime in on this, Reshma?
Yeah, I'm speaking from the corporate world, that my biggest fear is that if I am paving the way for other women, other girls to enter corporate world, especially at the advisory and board level, I don't want to be the only one, and I would like to encourage the pathway for others to come and join me and not be afraid of having shoulder to shoulder with men, because of the fear of not producing the same results or having a family or other responsibilities. That's the biggest fear, that just because I'm there, others think that, oh, she's able to go because she has all the luxury. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of knowledge and learning and bravery to be there, but you don't want to be the only one. So I encourage, which I want to tell all my beautiful sisters here and everyone else, that encourage others to join you. You know, there's second numbers, and especially at the corporate board level, innovation, technology, we need to be everywhere, because we also drive the ethics behind business, and that's what I fear, is that, you know, just because one person is there, everybody just takes back seat and they don't want to do the work. So let's champion all the girls to go into this pathway as well, not just for the PM first, but corporate world.
I would add to that as well. I mean, corporate world, but then political as well, being the only Muslim, you know, wearing a hijab in the state capital. And one of my biggest fears is that we don't have more people here, and we don't have a Muslim state legislator yet. Like Aisha mentioned, we need one. inshallah it'll be Aisha. But that's something that it's a fear that, you know, if I step out of this space, we need, you know, 10 more people at least to fill these seats and work in politics.
So I'll ask one more question. I really I am grateful to my guests for sticking around for so long. So one more, and then we'll wrap up. What advice would you give to a younger version of yourself? And feel free to determine how young you want to be to receive the advice you're giving today.
That I am enough. With Allah, I am enough.
For me, I think it's seize the moment. You know, take that opportunity to explore different experiences and to meet with different people and to, you know, try out different career paths. I think it's and then find what really you know, really appeals to you and really makes you want to get up in the morning.
I think, if I may, I would say, you know, to my younger self, that always hold to the rope of Allah, because no matter what happens in your life, if you are truthful to yourself and truthful to your faith and live your life per your faith, you have nothing to fear.
So my father shared some information with me. He told me, always let people know how you feel, but you never have to be rude. So since I've been serving since 2001 in the mainstream, that one nugget of his advice have served me well. And I would ask not the younger females and the daughters of our community, but the fathers of our community to treat their daughters in a way that they want their husbands to treat them. Because a girl learns that in her home by her father. And my father is the reason. My mother adored me to pieces, but it's my father's, the way he treated me gave me the confidence to leave my ex-husband in a foreign land 12,000 miles away and raise two of my own kids by myself, and then started an organization when I needed to do that. So the message is to the fathers and grandfathers and uncles, please treat your daughters, your nieces, your granddaughters well, so they can stand on their feet and they know how they need to be supported and treated.
So anybody that knows me knows I like to joke. So I would definitely tell myself to invest in Bitcoin, regardless of how much, right? Especially if we can go 10 years back. No, but seriously, I think that one of the best things that I could tell myself is that you don't have to do it alone. Definitely ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And you may fail, but that's how you learn the most. I think that oftentimes we doubt ourselves and we just second guess ourselves. But the reality is that in life, it's a journey. So when you talk about, you know, going back in time, the potential of a human being is not when they were 25 years old or 18 years old or anything like that. You know, we could live up to our 70s and possibly even beyond. And there's always time to make a change, try harder, try a different path. And your past doesn't define you, you know, so your future is exactly what you want to make it.
I would say for me, I would say listen to your mother. Really listen to her. There was times as a youngin where I just didn't think she understood. I didn't think she got it. You know, sometimes I thought, well, that's because we're Muslim or whatever the situation is. But growing up, I'm so much like her. And if I did listen to her, we would, but you know what I'm saying? Listen to your mom, and also patience. You know, as a kid, if I couldn't get it when I needed it, I gave it up. You know, I wanted to just master it, or I didn't want it at all. So I gave up playing the piano, and I was really good in high school. And if I kept going, I would be, Alicia Keys, girl, what's up? But, I gave up. So keep going, be patient. Time is of the essence. And, Allah got you at the end of the day.
Okay. Any other gems, pearls of wisdom? I see Dr. Rania unmuted.
Bismillah, sure. I would say that if I were speaking to a younger version of myself, I would remind myself of what my teachers told me early on, which is that, take hold of your youth and make sure that you never look back at it and regret. These are days where we tend to say to our teens and younger people, oh, they're just teens, but they're not just teens. We actually know that this is one of the most spiritual times of a person's life, and where they really fill their bucket to draw light from further on in life when it gets harder and tougher and busier. It's that bucket that needs to be filled then, in those years that are often missed by so many. So I'm saying this to any young people and any people who are caretakers of young people and nurturers of young people, to really make sure they fill their bucket as much as they can and don't look back with regret, inshallah.
Jazakallah for that gem. I am, Mr. Nilam tells me there's a video that needs to be played. So we'll play that video, and then I'll come back and conclude the evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, dear guest. And I think he wants us all to hang around. So a few more minutes, stick around and let's watch that video together. International Women's Day was born out of a movement of working-class women who marched through New York in 1908, demanding shorter hours, better pay, and voting rights. Intellectuals worry that International Women's Day is in danger of becoming a corporate Valentine's Day, when after one day or 1 month of celebration, everyone goes back home to the usual routines and attitudes. We are blessed that in our tradition, every day is Women's Day. God says in Surah Ahzab, "Indeed, the Muslim men and Muslim women, the believing men and believing women, the obedient men and obedient women, the truthful men and truthful women, the patient men and patient women, the humble men and humble women, the charitable men and charitable women, the fasting men and fasting women, the men who guard their privates and the women who do so, and the men who remember God often and the women who do so. For them, God has prepared forgiveness and a great reward." Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the program tonight. We are all sisters in faith. Alhamdulillah for the sisterhood. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. A pleasure having you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you all. May Allah reward you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.